The town of Chapata, where we began, is a market hub in this otherwise sparsely populated corner of Zambia. This broad sky, butterfly-shaped country in the southern African tropics is larger than any country within Europe, with a population equal to that of the Netherlands. We crossed the border here, arriving from Malawi on a gorgeous mid-October morning, and headed out in the afternoon for a safari in South Luangwa National Park. Spanning an area the size of the island of Cyprus, South Luangwa offers magnificent wildlife viewing opportunities, particularly during the dry season when the grasses are low and the semi-deciduous forests are relatively bare. We stayed in a simple bush camp deep within the park, just beside a dry sand river that floods during the rains. The park's relative remoteness and lack of roadways may help to preserve its wildness. We hardly encountered any other tourists during our 4 days in the park during the peak season. But in spite of its remoteness, and even in spite of active anti-poaching efforts, illegal hunting remains a great concern here. Some poaching of antelope species is due to the desperation of hungry local families in need of food, but not the poaching of elephants. Conservation workers told us that in the first 10 months of 2015, at least 30 elephants had already been killed in this park. That's at least 3 every month. The broad spectrum of habitats encompassed within the Luangwa River Valley include flowing rivers, grasslands, floodplains, seasonal sand rivers, and multiple types of woodland savannas, which support a great diversity of species. The rich pageant of its wildlife never ceases, even into the night. The Luangwa River Valley is also home to several unique species of large animals, including crochet zebra, identifiable by the style of their stripes, which are narrow with dark, sharp color all along their lengths. Likewise, Thornycroft's giraffe, also endemic to this valley, features a crisp pattern of small, shattered brown patches set close together. African wild dogs are spread across southern Africa, but their human-shy habits and highly endangered status make sighting them quite uncommon. We were lucky to spend several hours with 2 separate packs of these elusive creatures. But perhaps the highlight of visiting South Luangwa is the walking safari, where you trek quietly through the bush to watch the animals, meeting them on the ground, entering their world. Our tracker took us silently upwind from this family of elephants, so they were unaware of our presence. Elephants can get somewhat irritated by human presence, so watching their relaxed play while standing behind a nearby tree was especially breathtaking. On a later attempt to stealthily view a family of elephants, we were given away by a bird. The honey guide bird makes this special call. when she sees humans to indicate she can guide them to a bee's nest stocked with honey. She's hoping the humans will subdue the bees and break open the nest, taking what they want so she can feast on the leftovers. We remained still, but the elephants heard the honey guide call to us. They tested the ground for vibrations, and when they had triangulated our position, they made a wide berth around us. Though we didn't get a closer look at this family, it was fun to think we were part of this three-way interspecies communication. We did get a good look at another family digging to reach the water underneath the seasonal riverbed. The nominally paved Great East Road traverses the southern edge of eastern Zambia. During the 9-hour bus journey from Chipata to Lusaka, the bus played videos of lively African evangelical pop music non-stop. We passed hardly more than a few hamlets spread out along its length, without farm fields, but with a lot of coal. Lusaka, the capital of Zambia, is a stunning contrast to the wild, remote eastern part of the country. It's a fully modern city of 1.75 million people with bustling open-air markets, gleaming malls, and hip nightlife. More than 40% of Zambia's population lives in one of about a dozen urban centers comprising more than 100,000 people, of which Lusaka is the largest and Chipata among the smallest. Zambia's 16 million people fall into more than 70 ethno-linguistic groups who freely intermarry. Schools teach classes in English, the country's official language. Most Zambians are Christians, though some also practice indigenous belief systems, Islam, Hinduism, and Baha'i. But Christianity is the official state religion of Zambia, and the government sometimes turns to prayer to address national crises. For instance, the president had declared a national day of prayer to counteract the drop in the value of the nation's currency a few days before we had arrived. As elsewhere in southern Africa, a substantial South Asian business community remains here, a legacy of colonial times, when Indians came to work as clerks and soldiers or to pursue merchant opportunities in the expanding British Empire. Though there is some degree of intermarriage between Indians and other Zambians, a visible portion of the business community retains a sense of its Indian identity. They maintain a large Hindu temple and a large mosque, as well as the Gujarati language.
G-Cells, baby!
At the time of European contact, this region was dominated by mostly Bantu-speaking kingdoms, but during the late 19th century, local people were forcibly deprived of their lands and moved onto reservations by the British under the instigation of Cecil Rhodes, who did his best to control the African continent in favor of British mining and farming interests. Rhodes had dreamed of building a road from Cape Town to Cairo, uniting Africa under British dominion. A length of that road remains today as Cairo Road, a main thoroughfare through Lusaka. As British colonists came in droves, they built mines, farms, and towns, which still make up the economic backbone of Zambia. The colony was ultimately named Northern Rhodesia and administered as a British protectorate under an officially racist white government. But as Africans began to claim independence across the continent in the 1960s, so did the indigenous people of Northern Rhodesia fight and win independence in 1964. The National Museum in Lusaka features a highly detailed exhibit describing Zambia's struggle for independence, including a collection of magic charms that were used during the war, claiming powers that could, for instance, render their bearer invisible, allowing him to escape capture. We happened to arrive the day after the 51st Independence Day celebrations. The commemorative wreaths that had been left at Freedom Statue remained on display.
Help me bring them down.
From Lusaka, we headed south to Livingstone and Victoria Falls. The bus journey takes almost 7 hours along a smooth road, flanked by neat little towns and settlements along its way. Livingstone is a charming little city of a couple 100,000 people, with an open and friendly vibe and a heavy influx of international tourists who come to see the falls. In the older parts of the town, one can still make out the colonial facades. Though the southern part of Zambia, from Lusaka to Livingstone, appeared relatively modern and prosperous to us, having seen only the eastern part of the country, several Zambians we spoke to seemed to consider the wealthier northern part of the country, called the Copper Belt, culturally dominant. Of course, Victoria Falls was one of the highlights of our time in Zambia. We spent most of 2 days taking it in. Victoria Falls drops into a gorge where the ground is pulling apart along the course of the Zambezi River. Water plummets 355 feet over sheer basalt cliffs and then is channeled through the several narrow hairpin switchbacks of the rift. During the peak of the dry season in October, the Zambezi River is reduced to less than 40% of its maximum flow, and more than half of the fall's mile-long breadth is exposed as dry, rocky cliff face. Our guide leads us along a path down into the gorge where we can get close to the river. The path crosses a small tributary that comes up from underground to join the Zambezi River at this spot called the Boiling Pot, so named for the churn of the water when the river's flow is high. In the afternoon, we stopped by Mukuni, which is the chief village of the Leya people. The Leya are several thousands of people living here or in nearby villages. Their history is in some ways illustrative of historical trends within southern Africa over the past millennia. The Toko Leya founded their village about 800 years ago and had historically been ruled by a female chief. Then, about 300 years ago, as new ethnic groups were migrating steadily down from the north, a foreign male chief came to settle in the area. Somehow, he persuaded the Toko Leya chief to marry him and to share her power with him, forever changing their political structure and kinship system. To this day, Toko Leya are jointly ruled by two chiefs, a brother and a sister, who inherit their titles to their patriline. The male chief oversees the day-to-day running of the village, and the female chief oversees land allocation and other matters of tradition. Income from the modest fee charged for your tour is used to pay school fees for good students from poorer families and to provide villagers with transport to hospitals when needed. Early in the morning, we trekked across the dry Zambezi riverbed for a special view of Victoria Falls from the Devil's Pool, which looks directly down into the waters. The pool can only be reached during the dry season. To reach the pool, you must swim about 100 feet across the waters of the Zambezi just above the falls to a tiny rocky island and then climb down into the pool. The pool itself is about 12 feet deep and warm, with a broad semicircular lip from where its waters spill down the cliff face. We carefully hoisted ourselves onto this lip to look down for the most exhilarating view of the falls one can find. The river and gorge delineate the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe to the south. The Victoria Falls Bridge, built in 1905 as part of the Cape to Cairo Road originally envisioned by Cecil Rhodes, remains the only link across the gorge and still carries daily freight.
A bridge
We crossed on foot for a last view from Victoria Falls Park on the Zimbabwe side. During the dry season, most of the water that falls is best viewed from the southern side of the rift, which directly faces the falls. The continuous mist arising from the falls creates a narrow zone of rainforest ecosystem just along the cliff's edge. When the full face of the cliff is curtained by falling water, the whole view is said to be enveloped in heavy mist. I hope to return someday to see that too. And finally, a slow sundowner cruise is a lovely way to end a visit to southern Zambia. The Zambezi River is one of Africa's 5 primary river systems, draining more than 500,000 square miles of the continent along its 1,600-mile course from the Central African Plateau through 6 countries toward the Indian Ocean. Some distance above the falls, our boat moves slowly among several riverine islands where animals go to feed during the day. In the evening, we see them leaving the islands to return to the mainland. Though we got to see only a sliver of Zambia in our 12-day visit, we loved everything it had to offer, from its astounding wildlife and fresh beauty to its many storied histories, from its lively music scene to all the globalized amenities of its growing cities.
Nuona lini bwino, nuona lini bwino, nuona